Hi, thanks for joining me. In this video, we're going to discuss blending objects, and that is blending the colors on the objects. So if you haven't done so already, show some channel love by hitting the like and the subscribe button. Now, blending up an object is to create an even transition between the colors of paint that you apply in the different areas of the object. And that way it looks more natural. It's not standing out like a sore thumb. It doesn't look weird. We do it because it makes it look pleasant. So if this is the case, if you want to disrupt the viewer and cause them to have a reaction, you can do so by disjointing the painting, not blending in certain areas, and it causes conflict inside the brain, and they will kind of take notice sometimes. It's a way of holding their attention, but it will hold their attention on that area that's disjointed, and they may not take in the entire painting as one if you do not give them directions. So let's see what we're going to do. We're going to discuss the brushes first. And I have some artist type brushes here and some regular brushes. You'll be able to grab some, one or two, and not spend too much money on them. What I generally use for blending are brushes that are soft, the bristles rather, that are soft and are long. The exception to this rule is this one brush. The bristles are very short, but the way it's made, it's really fluffy. So this brush, and I just stumbled upon it by accident. I wasn't going to use this for blending, but I was in a mode and I grabbed it and found out that it works extremely well for blending. These are bristlettes, they call them. I think it's synthetic. Most of these brushes are synthetic. The only one that isn't is this brush. So these are synthetic, but it's really, really soft. And I mean really soft. You can find some that are a little softer than this, which I find watercolor brushes are really soft. So this one is a little firmer, but the bristles are longer and you can use it for blending. And because it has these squared off chiseled edges, I would use it for doing straight lines or in an area that's straight, not a curved area. This one feels almost like the other one does. This is a craft brush, so you can pick it up anywhere. It has quite a few more bristles. It doesn't come to a really chiseled edge, and the sides are not extremely straight. And that's the difference. Usually when the brushes cost quite a bit more money, they will hold their shape much longer. You can get around that by taking great care of your brush. So I'll probably do a video on taking care of your brushes. Now this is natural animal hair. Pretty sure it feels like, it's not boar bristles, but I'm not sure what it is, but these are natural bristles. And if you don't have this, you don't want to pay big money for that. You can get a makeup brush. That's why it looks so familiar. It looks just like a makeup brush. It feels like a makeup brush. When you use this brush, you have to use an extremely light hand, sort of like you would be just lightly applying makeup, very light. The bristles are barely touching. So they're barely going across, just barely touching, wispy, wispy. That's how you use this brush. Otherwise, it would get bogged down with paint, and then you would have to clean it and let it dry completely. So when you use this brush for blending, you want it to be dry. You want it to be really, really dry. This is not a brush that you use on wet, 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 wet paint. So when you apply your paint to your surface, you want to let that paint dry somewhat before you start using that brush to blend. I'm going to put those over out the way. That's why I have this word here. It tends to keep the camera in check, and sometimes it doesn't. So I have two ways of blending. I'm going to use a little paint here and a little here. And I'm using black and white. but I may switch. I know I'm doing this all wrong. Normally I have piles of paint and I'll draw a little out of the pile before bringing it down. So I'll do that, pretend to do that here, which I don't have enough paint to do that. So that paint is laying next there. Then I would lay the white paint here. And then I would come between the two paints. This technique takes a little bit more work than the other one. You go between the two, zigzagging, and then you come back and lightly brush. It takes a light hand and it takes patience. Not quite. You see that here? You can still see that demarcation. That's still a really hard line right here between the two. So what I normally do, and I call it lazy painting. I'm going to get this paint off of here. I call it lazy painting. This is what I normally do. Make my section that I'm going to paint. In this technique, the paint must be wet. Both of them, the paint needs to be wet. I'm going to clean that off. And now I'm going to come back with the white. Put it right up next to it. I probably painted that backwards. I should have put it that way, but I didn't get any black on there. And now I'm going to just take my natural paintbrush and I'm going to dab back and forth across the two. Only right here along this line. I'm leaving that untouched and this untouched. I'm only concentrating on the area, this strip right here where the two colors meet. I'm tapping, lightly tapping back and forth from one side to the other. And that's why it has to be, the paint has to be wet. Back and forth. You can go back and forth here, zigzag, around in circles. You're just making it work. Really, just that area. So the smaller the area, the tighter it is, the smaller the taps. It has a better transition. See that? It's got a better transition along this line than that one does here. Again, it has to be wet. It has to be wet. And so then I would let it dry a little more and then come across it with a brush. Just lightly touching it, coming across it with the brush. But that almost took out that hard line. You don't see this hard line, you don't see it over there. It can work with any color, doesn't matter. I just use black and white because those are the two paints I had here that were really thick. You want to make sure your paints have the same consistency, otherwise it'll take a little bit more work in getting that how you want it. So remember those fingers, that finger brush is great. Very good for painting, blending of your paints. And you do this along your objects, excuse me, the different objects in the painting, whether it's your background or your whatever subject matter you have in there. Just say you may do this to a leg, then you may do it to an arm if you're painting a person, a pet, you do it to a face, a leg, body. It doesn't matter. You treat one area at a time, wherever the two different colors meet, because they'll meet. It's like night and day when it does. Let's see, I'll put another one down here. Let's see how this works. I'm just putting strips here. Normally, again, I will pull paint from a pile. Put that there. It's not going to take long. The only time these take long is when you labor over them. So now I'm going to do the zigzag, small zigzag right here between the two, and then brush, lightly brush them. Small zigzag again, and lightly brush. You end up creating two lines. You create a line here between the light, between this color and the new color, and you create a line here between the new color and the original color. So you go back and forth with the zigzag, and then you come back and lightly blend. And I tell you, it takes a little patience and a little practice, but once you get it done, I've seen beautiful artwork done with that. Now, I'm going to use my finger here, back and forth, around, lightly tapping. Sometimes you have to tap a little heavier than light, but you can tell, depends on how much paint you have down here. I don't have a lot of paint down here. But you go back and forth, just that little line. I'm keeping the other areas like they are. I'm not touching those areas of the paint. Just round, back and forth across the blue and the yellow. See it mix and make that green. That's what we're working with. That line is gone. However, it did create another little line up there. I'm going to wipe the paint off my finger. And my finger is just slightly wet. And then I'm going to tap right here between the blue and the green. And you have to have enough paint on here. But I'm just tapping back and forth. I'm going to wipe my hand off again, and I'm going to tap right here on this area because my finger's just slightly wet. I'm going to tap here. And that'll just give you that flawless look. Much better. It looks so much better than if you were laying paint down and it looked like this. This is not what you want. That. This is two paints laid down next to each other. There's no blending whatsoever, just a swipe of the brush. But you use one of these techniques instead of this technique right here. This is just laying the paints down and letting them do whatever they do. This is what you do if you're going for an impressionism style painting. You lay the paints next to each other, no blending at all. And if you're trying to make an object look more realistic, then you use these. You can do it with this technique. It just takes a little bit more work. So that's why we blend, because we get that smooth or easier transition between these colors, these two colors, than this. This is not a smooth transition. It's from just one to the other. It's very abrupt. And in here, we transition, and in here, we transition between the two colors. Takes a little bit more work, but the results are great. All right, thanks for joining me. Until next time.